I am Colin Kelly. I'm a media relations trainer and consultant. We help organisations with powerful communication. I'm just picking up on a story on the front of the Scottish Daily Mail today about Arnold Clark, the motor dealership. Scottish Daily Mail is making a whole load of allegations about a cybersecurity incident. It's a very dramatic story, very serious story. Let me show you Arnold Clark's response. This was their tweet on the 3rd of January, which is still pinned to the top of the Arnold Clark official Twitter, and it's very similar to the spokesperson's quote, which is contained in the Scottish Daily Mail today. I can't really talk about their business and this incident. I'm not involved. I don't know what's going on. All I know is what the Scottish Daily Mail have said and the Arnold Clark response, and I don't want a lawyer's letter from anybody. So what I would like to do is speak generally about the lessons maybe that your business can take from this and a few things to consider. I think the first thing is that some sort of cyber incident is now an extremely likely crisis scenario for every business. So I was always taught that the number one cause of a business crisis was a fire. And what I'm learning now is that alongside that, every business is likely to encounter some sort of cybersecurity or data-related incident at some point. So being prepared for this is really important. The other thing to say is that for years, Arnold Clark had a very obvious human focal point in their business. Arnold Clark, Sir Arnold Clark, built that business. He was in the adverts. He was a very well-known Scottish figure. I think he transcended even the world of business. Pretty much everybody knew him. And he was a unique character, a wonderful guy, and of course his signature on all the marketing collateral. So they benefited from that for a long, long time, in the same way that the Virgin Group benefit from Sir Richard Branson. Now, unfortunately, for the last few years, sadly, Sir Arnold Clark has not been with us. And as the business has developed and evolved and gone into new territory, they haven't replaced him in terms of that human focal point of the business. Now, they've got a perfectly great leadership team, perfectly good people. In terms of the leadership of the business, I would say they're probably in a stronger position than having it just all on that one focal point. But this is about the public perception of the business. And importantly, the public perception of your business. When something happens, when there's some sort of situation where you have to ask the public, when you have to ask your customers, look, stick with us. It's much easier to do that if there is a human face, if there's a set of eyes that the public can look into and decide to trust. It's really difficult to trust somebody if, well, who am I trusting? Who's there? There's nobody there. It's a brand. It's a spokesperson. It's faceless. And that, I think, is one of the real challenges that businesses face if this is the road that they're going down, or if this happens. And of course, when it happens, it might well be too late, because you might be given advice. You might be told, look, you've been the victim of a serious crime here. Don't put anybody up. Don't put a name against it, because then that person might become the focal point from the criminal enterprise. But if you've built up that goodwill, if you've built up that human face when things are good, then it makes it easier to reassure people when things are not so good, when things are challenging. So it's one of the reasons when we go into businesses, even where everything's plain sailing, everything's going well, and you've got a CEO or an MD that goes, well, I don't want to be, don't put me in front of the camera. And we always say, well, actually, maybe we should. And it doesn't need to be the most senior person. It often will be. It doesn't need to be the person at the top. But I think having some human face makes it much, much easier to trust a business when things are difficult. The second thing to say, and again, in Arnold Clark's case in particular, there may well be perfectly reasonable, a perfectly reasonable explanation for this. They may have felt like they had very little choice. But I think it's fair to say that they have taken a strategy since the story broke on the 23rd of December, or when this incident began on the 23rd of December. They haven't said very much about it. It's a very contained, controlled statement that hasn't moved since the 3rd of January. The other thing that they've done is they've not really been terribly proactive about this. I think it's fair to say. Given that this began a month ago, there will be thousands and thousands of people where the first they'll know of this is what they've read in the Scottish Daily Mail today. I'm an Arnold Clark customer. There's lots of people in my family are Arnold Clark customers, and they didn't know. They didn't know about this. The only reason I knew was because I tried to book my car in for a service. So if you bought a car from Arnold Clark 10 years ago, Scottish Daily Mail today is suggesting that your data might be at risk. Anybody that's used them might be at risk. Those people would not have had occasion to look at Arnold Clark's Twitter. They would not have been on trying to buy a car or trying to book a service, and they didn't read the small bit that appeared in the Scottish Sun. So it's quite likely that the first they've heard about it is this article in the newspaper today, which, as I said, is very dramatic, and I don't know if it's true or not. It's just the Scottish Daily Mail's take. And so what that does is it puts the business now into a very defensive position, where in the eyes of thousands of people who didn't know there was a problem, they wake up this morning, huge article on the front of the Scottish Daily Mail, making all sorts of dramatic claims, and then a limited, faceless corporate response from Arnold Clark. And again, there might be very good reason why they weren't, but if they had been, and if this was you, if you were able to be more proactive to not just customers, but previous customers that might be affected by this, give them some sort of, personal, personalized approach to explain to them. Look, you might read this in the newspapers, you might hear about this. It's easier if you can get your version of events out first. It's much easier. Now, the approach they've taken has contained this story for a month, which is very good going. But it's meant that people woke up this morning to all sorts of claims in the Scottish Daily Mail that Arnold Clark now have to answer. And I would imagine that on Monday morning, their phones are going to be ringing off the hook, and it's going to put the staff under pressure, and it's going to further disrupt business. So it's a really challenging situation. And I always think with all of this, it's always good if you can learn from someone else's experience with this. So cultivate a human, trusted face of your business, and think very carefully about how proactive you need to be about communications. And yes, you'll have the lawyers and the legal team all saying things to you, but maybe you could be a bit more proactive and personal. I absolutely get. Of course, we want to contain the story, and if we look at what Arnold Clark is saying, well, maybe they've contained the whole incident. Maybe there isn't a much of a story. Maybe what the Scottish Daily Mail is saying, maybe it's not true. I mean, if you read the fine print of that statement, they say our priority's been to protect our customers' data, our systems, and our third-party partners, and it says while this has been achieved. So, well, that kind of contradicts what the Scottish Daily Mail is saying. So, but it's all about how this is perceived by the ordinary people. And what's happened is thousands of people have read something in the Scottish Daily Mail today. And is Arnold Clark able to maintain that trust? Well, we'll find out. But crucially, what would you do in that situation? So I hope there's a few things there that have got you thinking and that help. And like I say, there is a very high risk for every business that some sort of cyber incident, some sort of incident relating to data is extremely likely to happen. So think now about what you can do to mitigate that and keep yourself safe, but also in terms of the way your business is perceived, what do you need to do in terms of proactive media relations and having that familiar, recognizable, trusted face of your business.